I still hear their voices, soft, firm, almost rehearsed. Hazel, this is to prepare you for marriage. You must learn. For years I thought they were keeping me safe. But the night my husband finally arrived, the truth behind all those preparations didn't just scare me. It broke me in a way I'm not sure I ever fully healed from. Oh my stars, forgive me. Let me start the proper way. My name is Hazel Marie Whitford and I'm 81 years old, though in my heart I still feel like the barefoot girl who used to run through the apple orchards behind our old farmhouse. If this is your first time visiting, welcome, sweetheart. Come sit with me a moment. I've put the kettle on, and there's nothing I love more than sharing a warm cup of tea and a story with someone who cares to listen. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, the ones woven with memory, heartache, lessons, and a little grandmotherly truth, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It truly does mean the world to me. Well, I suppose I'm finally ready to talk about this part of my life. It's taken me decades to gather the courage, and even now, my hands tremble a little as I remember the beginning of it all. I grew up in a small town in northern Michigan, back when winters were long and sharp enough to carve patterns on the windows, and summers smelled like wildflowers and lake air. Folks like to say life was simpler then, but simple isn't always the same as gentle. Our home was a 2-story white farmhouse with green shutters my father repainted every spring. Mama kept the porch full of geraniums, bright red against the peeling boards. I can still smell the place if I close my eyes. The sweet scent of wheat biscuits she baked on Sundays, the pine from Daddy's workshop, and the lavender sachets Mama tucked into every drawer. It was the early 1960s, a time when girls wore their best dresses to church, learned to fold linens perfectly, and were expected to be marriage-ready before they were even grown women. At least that's what my parents believed. I was an only child, something rare in those days, and it meant every expectation fell squarely on my shoulders. Daddy was strict, a tall man with a voice that could silence a room. Mama was quieter, always mending something, always humming something, always avoiding Daddy's eyes when he began speaking about my future. And he did speak about it often. Far too often. Your husband will want a proper wife, Hazel. You must be trained before he comes. You're not like other girls, you'll have responsibilities. At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. A husband, already chosen, but they never explained. They only told me I needed to be prepared. Those early years, despite the hints, still held beauty. I remember the warm glow of the kerosene lamp in the evenings, the soft static of the old radio as it played Patsy Cline, Mama brushing my hair with slow, loving strokes. I remember snowball fights in the yard, the wooden swing Daddy hung from the oak tree, the feeling of safety I thought I had. I wish I could hold on to just those moments. But childhood has a way of changing overnight. The first real shift came on an early autumn evening. The leaves had just begun turning amber, and the air smelled like wood smoke from distant chimneys. Mama asked me, no, insisted that I put on my Sunday dress for dinner. We're eating at home, I said, confused. I know, she whispered, eyes lowered. But he wants you to look presentable. That was the first time she ever used the word like that. As if he already had a place in our home. In my life. In the very air we breathed. That night was the beginning. The beginning of their preparations. The beginning of my fear. And the beginning of a truth I would not uncover until the day my husband finally came for me. And everything I believed about my parents shattered. The night Mama made me wear that Sunday dress, something in the air felt different, thicker, heavier, like the whole house was holding its breath. She had pressed my dress earlier that afternoon, smoothing every wrinkle with hands that trembled each time the iron hissed against the fabric. Mama was good at hiding her nerves, but children notice things adults think they can conceal. When I walked into the dining room, Daddy was already seated at the head of the table. His shirt was buttoned all the way up, his hair slicked back with Brill cream, the way he styled it only on church days or when important company came. But that night there was no company. Just the three of us. Or at least that's what I thought. He didn't smile when he saw me. Daddy never smiled much. But he nodded, one curt, approving nod as if I were a project meeting his standards. And he murmured, "You look decent." Decent. That was the highest praise he ever offered me. Mama served the pot roast, her hands shaking so much she nearly spilled the gravy. Daddy glared at her and she stiffened, holding the ladle straighter. "Hear anything from him?" Daddy asked suddenly. Mama's eyes flicked toward me, then down to her plate. "Not yet," she whispered. He clicked his tongue, annoyed. He's taking too long. I kept eating, pretending I understood nothing. Truth was, I didn't. The way they spoke felt coded, secretive, but every word pressed against my skin like cold fingertips. That night was when the first real suspicious clue fell into my lap, quite literally. As I cleared the table after dinner, I took Daddy's plate first. He rose from his chair with a grunt, went to his coat hanging on the wall hook, and reached into the inside pocket to retrieve his tobacco pouch. But when he pulled it out, another item slipped to the floor, a small ivory envelope tied with a thin twine string. He didn't notice it fall. But I did. I bent to pick it up, my curiosity bright and innocent. The envelope was heavier than I expected, and there was a faint scent of cigar smoke clinging to it. Written across the front in elegant, slanted handwriting was a name I didn't recognize. For Mr. Cartwell, regarding Hazel. Hazel. My name. I froze. Before I could open my mouth, Daddy turned sharply. His boots thudded against the wooden floor, and in 3 strides he was towering over me. He snatched the envelope so fast he grazed my knuckles. Where'd you get that? He barked. It fell, I stammered. He stuffed it deep into his coat pocket, as if afraid the air itself might steal it from him. You mind your own business, Hazel. Don't touch what isn't yours. Mama stood by the sink, her back rigid, shoulders tight, head bowed. She didn't look at me, not once. That was the first of many nights I cried quietly into my pillow, trying to make sense of the strange puzzle forming around me. Every piece was connected to one thing: my future husband. But I still didn't know who he was, or why things felt so secretive. In the weeks that followed, the house changed. Or maybe my awareness sharpened. Daddy became more watchful, more controlling. I was no longer allowed to play outside after supper. I had to practice setting the table properly, rehearse polite greetings, and sit with my back straight for long periods. Posture matters, he'd snap. Grace matters. You don't want to embarrass us. Never me. Always them. Mama began sewing more dresses for me, longer, heavier fabrics, muted colors. She measured me constantly, whispering under her breath, "You're growing too fast." Not yet. Not yet. Every evening, Daddy checked the mailbox before I could get near it. Sometimes he'd return inside with another envelope tucked secretly into his coat. And every time Mama would flinch. The second suspicious clue came one night when Daddy was asleep in his armchair. Mama slipped one of those letters into the wood-burning stove, and I swear I saw a tear fall as the flames devoured it. I didn't yet understand the truth, but I could feel it. Something was wrong. Very wrong. After Mama burned that letter in the wood stove, the house took on a strange kind of silence, the heavy kind like the air before a storm. Even at 13, I could sense something shifting beneath the surface, something adults didn't want me to see. But children feel things, and I felt everything. The preparations, as my parents called them, began quietly at first. Little corrections. Small expectations. But soon it became my entire life. Mama woke me earlier than usual each morning, long before the sun touched the frosted windows. She would gently shake my shoulder, her voice soft but urgent. "Hazel, get up now, we have work." The first morning I thought she meant canning peaches or helping her churn butter. But instead she led me to the parlor, our nicest room, reserved for guests no one ever saw. The curtains were drawn and the air smelled of cedar polish and something else. Something like nerves. She had laid out a notebook, a stack of freshly ironed linen napkins, and my newest dress. A lace collar. Pressed sleeves. Too formal for a regular day. "Mama, what's all this?" I asked. Her hands paused mid-fold, the knuckles pale. "Hazel," she whispered. "You're growing older. It's time you learned how to be proper." That word again. Proper. Prepared. Ready. Ready for what? They never said. But that morning marked the beginning of husband training. My mother didn't call it that, but that's what it was. She taught me how to sit, back straight, ankles crossed, hands folded neatly in my lap. If I fidgeted, she'd sigh. Not angrily, but with a sorrow so deep it felt like she were apologizing for something without saying it. She made me practice greeting invisible guests, bowing my head politely, offering a smile that didn't show teeth. "A lady never appears eager," she said. Every lesson carried the same undertone. Someone was coming for me. Someone important. Someone older. And I had to be perfect. But the most unsettling part was the way Mama kept glancing toward the window, as if expecting someone to arrive at any moment. One afternoon, after hours of posture lessons, I found her sewing a new dress, one I hadn't seen before. The fabric was a deep navy blue with a tiny pearl button at the collar. It looked like something a grown woman would wear, not a girl my age. "Mama, that dress isn't for me, is it?" I asked. Her needle paused mid-air. "It's for when he comes." "Who?" She didn't answer. Not with words. Her eyes glistened and she bit her lip. That silence told me more than any explanation could. The third suspicious clue came a few days later. Daddy arrived home from the store earlier than usual, slamming the door with a force that rattled the picture frames on the wall. His boots stomped across the floor with purpose. Mama stiffened, setting down her sewing. "Another letter?" she asked, barely audible. He grunted, pulling a folded paper from his coat. "He wants to visit. Soon." Mama's face paled. "Hazel isn't, she's still." "She'll manage," Daddy snapped. "I told him she's obedient." My blood froze. Obedient. Like I was livestock. I stood quietly in the kitchen doorway, unseen, listening as my parents talked about me like I was a transaction. Mama kept whispering, "She's too young." But Daddy brushed her off with a firmness that made her shrink into herself. That night, after Daddy went to bed, Mama crept into my room. I felt the mattress dip as she sat beside me. Her hand shook as she brushed my hair back behind my ear. "Hazel, listen to me," she whispered. "When he visits, you keep your eyes lowered. Speak softly. Answer what he asks and nothing more." I blinked up at her in confusion and fear. "Mama, who is he?" She swallowed hard. "Your future. That's all you need to know." No child should ever hear something like that. Not in that tone. Not with that kind of finality. The fourth suspicious clue came 2 days later. Mama handed me a box. Inside was a string of freshwater pearls, beautiful, delicate, and far too costly for our modest life. "Where did these come from?" I asked. Her glance shot toward the living room where Daddy smoked his pipe. "A gift," she murmured. "For you." "From him." My stomach tightened. A stranger was buying me jewelry. A grown man I had never met was preparing to visit. My parents were training me to please him, impress him, obey him. Everything in my body screamed that something was wrong. And yet nobody would tell me the truth. But I would learn it soon enough on the day he finally came. The morning he came, the air felt different, too still, as if even the birds sensed something they didn't want to witness. I woke before Mama shook my shoulder because I couldn't sleep. My stomach had been twisting all night, as though my body already knew what my mind couldn't yet understand. Mama dressed me slowly that morning. It reminded me of when I was little and she'd button my coat before church, except this time her hands moved with dread instead of motherly tenderness. She put me in the navy blue dress she'd sewn, the one that made me look older, tense in the shoulders and strangely unfamiliar in the mirror. She brushed my hair into a neat low bun. I hated it. I wanted to keep the curls loose, but Mama insisted. "You must look mature," she whispered. "Respectable." There was that word again. Respectable. To whom? For what? She fastened the freshwater pearls around my neck with trembling fingers. A stranger's pearls. A stranger's choice. I remember looking at myself in the mirror. 13 years old, dressed like a grown woman. Hair pulled back, fear in my eyes, shoulders stiff. I didn't recognize the girl staring back. Daddy's voice thundered down the hall. "He'll be here any minute. Hazel, stand straight." I did. As I always did. Daddy paced the living room, boots heavy on the floorboards. Mama kept her hands clasped tight, her knuckles white. She never looked toward the window, though I could tell she wanted to. She just couldn't bear it. When the knock came, a hollow, deliberate sound, my entire body went cold. One knock. Then another. Slow. Controlled. As if the man on the other side owned the air we breathed. Daddy straightened his posture, cleared his throat, and opened the door. The man who stood there was not what I imagined a future husband would look like, not even in the strict world my father believed in. He was older. Much older. Not in his 40s or 50s like Daddy had hinted. Closer to 60, perhaps beyond that. His hair was silver around the edges, combed neatly. His suit looked expensive, too expensive for our little Michigan town, dark and tailored to his tall, lean frame. He held a hat in one hand and a polished cane in the other, though he didn't seem to need it. His eyes, pale and sharp, scanned the room and then landed on me. It wasn't the look a man should ever give a child. Not curious. Not kind. Assessing. Like he was inspecting something he already believed he'd purchased. Hazel, Daddy barked. Curtsy. I obeyed. Always. The man nodded in approval. She's lovely, he said, voice low and smooth as if he were evaluating a painting or fine china. Quite lovely. She'll do well. She'll do well. Not she's kind or bright or young. Just she'll do. Every instinct in me screamed. Every part of me wanted to run. Mama finally looked up then. The expression on her face will haunt me until my final breath. She looked like someone watching her child drown and being told to stay still. Daddy invited the man in with the politeness he never gave Mama or me. Hazel, bring our guest some tea, he ordered. I went to the kitchen because I had no choice. My hands shook as I poured the tea, spilling a little on the saucer. I wiped it quickly and steadied myself. When I returned, the two men were talking in hushed tones near the fireplace. I caught fragments. Payment. Timing. She'll be ready. Young enough. Mama stood nearby, head bowed, pretending not to hear. Or maybe trying not to fall apart. I set the tea tray down. The man took his cup and smiled at me, slow, deliberate. Come here, Hazel, he said softly. Daddy nodded, so I stepped forward. He lifted my chin with one gloved finger. Yes, he murmured. You're exactly as promised. Promised. That word carved something devastating into my heart. I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a child. I was a promise. An arrangement. A transaction. The man left after an hour, but the damage had been done long before the door closed behind him. Daddy saw opportunity. Mama saw tragedy. And I saw the truth for the first time. I wasn't being prepared for a future. I was being prepared for him. And the look in Daddy's eyes told me nothing, not my tears, not my age, not my fear would change what he had planned. When the man's car disappeared down the long gravel road, Mama fled to the kitchen, gripping the counter to steady herself. Daddy turned to me, his voice firm, final. You will marry him when the time comes, Hazel. He's providing generosity to this family you cannot comprehend. Now behave accordingly. Behave accordingly. As if obedience were my destiny. As if I had no say. As if my life already belonged to a man I'd met only once. I went to bed that night with the pearls still around my neck because I couldn't unclasp them with my shaking fingers. And I cried until my pillow grew cold. Nothing would ever be the same again. The morning after his visit, the house felt haunted not by ghosts, but by decisions made behind closed doors. Decisions made about me. I woke to the faint smell of bacon and coffee, but neither offered comfort. Not anymore. Everything familiar had soured overnight. Mama didn't knock when she entered my room. She simply walked in, her shoulders hunched, her fingers tangled together like she was holding herself from breaking apart. Hazel, she said softly, get dressed. Your father wants to speak with you. Her voice was thin, trembling like a loose window pane in the wind. I slipped out of bed, the pearls still around my neck because I'd cried myself to sleep in them. They felt heavier now. Like chains. Mama gently unclasped them and set them into a little dish on my dresser. For a split second, her hand lingered on the pearls, then she exhaled shakily and stepped back. Wear something modest today, she whispered. I stared at her. Mama, why him? Why me? Why are you letting Daddy do this? It was the first time I ever questioned her like that. Her eyes filled instantly. She pressed her trembling fingers to her lips, as if every answer inside her was trying to escape. Hazel, she said softly, your father believes he's doing what's best. This man he's offering, her voice cracked. Something we can't repay. That word didn't belong in a child's life. What did you promise him? I whispered. Mama turned away. That silence told me more than words could. I had been traded. Not chosen. Not cherished. Bartered. When I walked into the kitchen, Daddy sat at the table with a half-empty cup of coffee. The morning light caught on the dust floating in the air, making everything look hazy, dreamlike, unreal. He didn't greet me. He never did. Sit, he ordered. I sat. He didn't waste time. You behaved well yesterday. That's good. My stomach clenched. He's wealthy, Daddy continued. Respected. A man with influence and power. A man who can give you a life far better than anything you'd get in a place like this. I kept my eyes on the wooden table, tracing the scratches with my fingertip. He's old. Daddy slammed his fist down so hard my chair jerked beneath me. Age is irrelevant, Hazel. What matters is opportunity. Opportunity for whom? Certainly not for me. He leaned forward, his eyes cold as winter river ice. You will continue your lessons with your mother every day. You will learn to cook, keep house, speak properly, and show the man the respect he deserves. When the time is right, the arrangement will be completed. The arrangement. I was part of an arrangement. I felt myself shrinking like I was folding inward, trying to disappear. What if I don't want to? I whispered. The silence that followed was suffocating. Daddy's jaw tightened. You're 13, Hazel. You'll do as you're told. You will not embarrass this family. Is that clear? I didn't answer. Not at first. But fear has a way of stealing a child's voice. Yes, sir, I finally murmured. He nodded, satisfied. Mama stood near the doorway, a dish towel clutched in her hands. Her face was pale, eyes shiny with tears. She tried to blink away. Daddy didn't look her way. He never looked at her when she was hurting, maybe because deep down he knew he caused that hurt. After that morning, my life narrowed into strict routines. The fifth suspicious clue came during that time, hidden in the fabric of daily expectations. Daddy began locking the mailbox. He installed a small metal padlock on it, claiming too many nosy neighbors snooped around. But the truth was clear. He didn't want me or anyone but him, seeing the letters that still arrived almost weekly. Letters addressed to him. Letters about me. Letters tied to a future I was being forced into. And Mama? She grew quieter. Smaller. Her smiles became rare, brittle things. She began humming hymns again, but not the comforting ones from my childhood. These were low, mournful ones that sounded like prayers for someone drowning. Some days when Daddy was at the store, Mama would stop my lessons early. She'd sit beside me on the sofa, take my hands and whisper, "I'm so sorry, Hazel. I'm so sorry." I would ask her why, beg her to explain, but she would only shake her head, tears slipping down her cheeks, lips pressed tight as if someone had sewn them shut. Mama wasn't cruel. She wasn't heartless. She was trapped just like me. Only difference was hers was a prison of regret. Mine was a prison of future promises. One evening, after another long day of posture practice and forced curtsies, I walked past Mama's bedroom and heard her sobbing quietly. Daddy's voice was low, tense, threatening. "You made the deal. You don't back out now. I made it because you said we had no choice." Mama cried. "She's a child." Daddy's voice cut like a knife. "And he's the only man willing to help us. We need that money. You know we do." Money. Of course it was money. I finally understood. I wasn't being prepared for marriage. I was being sold to save them. And the worst part? The man who purchased me would return soon. Very soon. I remember the moment like a needle drop in an empty room, sharp, tiny, but loud enough to echo forever. It was late spring of 1964, the kind of cool, breezy evening when the curtains sway like slow dancers and the house feels too quiet. Henry had stepped out to run an errand, but something in his voice had trembled. That alone unsettled me. Henry never trembled, he boomed, he commanded, he filled a room like thunder. Trembling wasn't his way. The lamp beside my armchair flickered as I sat with my sewing, though I barely saw the fabric in my hands. My mind kept replaying the past few weeks. The whispers on the phone, the letters he tucked into his jacket, the locked drawer. Each clue had been small, yes, but set together they painted a picture that made my chest feel tight. And maybe that's why I finally stood up and walked toward the bedroom. Maybe that's why my feet took me straight to the dresser, the old oak one Henry loved. Maybe that's why, without even thinking, I reached for that locked drawer again. I don't know what possessed me, courage, fear, or plain desperation, but this time, instead of tugging uselessly at the handle, I reached behind the picture frame above it, the one with his parents' wedding photo. I don't know why. Instinct maybe. And there was a tiny rusted key taped to the back. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped it. It felt like holding a match too close to dry paper. Something in me knew that if I used that key, everything, every memory, every belief about my parents' preparations, every detail of my marriage, might suddenly rearrange into a truth I didn't want. But I also knew I couldn't keep walking blind. Not anymore. I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a soft, traitorous click. Inside were letters, dozens of them, bound with twine. I didn't recognize the handwriting. Small, neat, careful strokes. Each envelope had my parents' address on it. Each one had been opened already. My heart hammered against my ribs as I picked up the first one. It was dated only a month before Henry and I married. I unfolded the letter. The air felt cold against my hands. Mr. and Mrs. Whitfield, it began, I am writing to confirm our agreement. Hazel will be well looked after. You have my word that the arrangement will remain discreet. As promised, I will provide regular financial support as long as the conditions are met. My throat closed up. Agreement. Arrangement. Financial support. Conditions. The words stung like salt. I read the next line. She will not be told until the appropriate time, and even then I will soften the truth. My vision blurred. I sat down on the edge of the bed because my legs might have given out. I read the second letter and the third. Each one confirmed the same horrifying thing. My marriage wasn't a marriage built from love or chance. It wasn't destiny. It wasn't fate. It wasn't my choice. It had been arranged, purchased, negotiated. My parents, the same parents who said they were preparing me for marriage, who held my hands and brushed my hair and said they wanted only the best for me, had sold my future to Henry in exchange for monthly payments. My hands were ice. My stomach kept twisting as if I'd swallowed stones. There was one more item in the drawer. A thin folder. I opened it. Inside were receipts. Receipts for money Henry had sent them. Even after we married. Even after I had given birth to our first son. The betrayal hit me so hard I had to cover my mouth to keep from screaming. My parents, my own parents, had kept taking money from me like I was some kind of product. I don't know how long I sat there, clutching those letters, but by the time Henry returned, the room was dark except for the dim glow of the hallway light. He stepped inside, saw the open drawer, saw the letters scattered on the bed, and his face collapsed. He didn't yell. He didn't lie. He just whispered, almost broken, "Hazel, you weren't supposed to find those." And in that moment, even before he sat beside me, before he tried to explain, before he reached for my trembling hands, I knew my life had changed forever. I don't think a person truly understands silence until they've sat through the kind that follows betrayal. Not the loud, angry kind, no. That's easy. That burns quick. The silence I sat in that night was thick, cold, and alive, wrapping around every corner of the room like fog after a storm. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to scream or cry or collapse. But I didn't do any of those things. I just stared at the letters spread across the bed, their edges soft and yellowed, their words heavy as iron. And Henry, he sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him but not touching me. His hands were clasped together as if he were praying. Or begging. Maybe both. "Hazel," he said gently, his voice low and shaky. "I need you to listen before you decide what to think." I didn't look at him. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on the handwriting of the man I thought I knew, this calculated, measured script that had weaved my entire life into a private transaction. "You bought me," I whispered. The words tasted like metal. Henry's breath caught, but he didn't rush to defend himself. He stared at the floor, fingers twisting together. "I didn't buy you. I paid for the chance to keep you safe. To give you a life your parents said they couldn't provide." My chest tightened. "Don't," I whispered. "Don't turn this into some kind of kindness." He nodded slowly, shame written across his face. "You're right. I won't. It wasn't kindness. But Hazel, it wasn't what you think." I finally looked at him then. His eyes were different, older, defeated, as if he'd aged 10 years in the hours since he left the house. He swallowed hard. "I loved you from the moment I saw you. You were working in that general store, humming while you dusted the shelves. I'd never seen anyone look so peaceful doing something so small. But your parents," he shook his head. "They made it clear they wouldn't let you marry a man without means. They wrote me first, Hazel. Not the other way around." The room spun a little. My parents had approached him? Initiated the arrangement? The thought hit me like a slap. He continued, his voice breaking. "Your father said he wanted you to have a future. A stable one. And I agreed to support them financially until they could get back on their feet. They said it was temporary. They said it was to help the family." My jaw clenched. I remembered those days, my parents whispering about money troubles, about the farm struggling, about bills they kept hidden from me. I remembered their sudden insistence that Henry was a good man, their warm approval, their encouragement. How they said over and over, "We're preparing you for marriage." preparing me, is training me, grooming me, conditioning me. My stomach rolled. But why keep paying them after the wedding? I asked. After the baby? Henry's face crumpled. Because they demanded it. Those words snapped something inside me. My parents had used me. Not once. Not accidentally. But for years. They said if I didn't continue, he whispered, voice nearly gone, they'd tell you the truth and you'd leave me. And Hazel. I couldn't bear that thought. I thought I was protecting us. Protecting you from the pain of knowing. A tear slipped down his cheek then, the first I had ever seen from him in all our years together. Henry, the unshakable, strong, broad-shouldered man, breaking like an autumn branch. I should have felt sympathy. I should have felt something warm. But all I felt was hollow. A deep, echoing emptiness that spread through my ribs and settled behind my heart. I need air, I said quietly. I stood up, walked past him, past the doorway, past the kitchen where a pot of stew still sat untouched. It scent sickeningly warm and familiar. I stepped onto the porch where the night air hit me like a cool wave. The cicadas hummed in the distance. A dog barked somewhere down Maple Street. And I stood there, hands gripping the railing, staring out into the dark yard, asking myself a question I never imagined I'd face. If the foundation of my marriage was built on a lie, then what did that make the life I'd lived since? Inside the house, I heard the soft sound of Henry crying. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet, defeated sobs. The kind a man makes when he realizes he might lose everything he ever cared about. And though I didn't turn around, though I didn't go inside or comfort him or forgive him, not yet, maybe not ever, another question formed slowly in my mind. Who betrayed me more? My husband, or my parents? A chill crawled up my spine as another realization settled heavily over me. This wasn't the end of the truth. This was only the beginning. The weeks that followed the discovery were heavy, suffocating, and long. I remember waking each morning to a house that felt smaller than ever, as if the walls had shrunk around me to keep me trapped in the truth I now carried. Henry tried to speak, tried to explain, but his words only echoed the hollow realization I already lived with. My parents had sold me. And I could not forget it, not for a single minute. Mama stopped speaking to me much at all. She'd sit at the kitchen table, staring at the chipped linoleum, humming the same quiet hymns she had sung while sewing my dresses. I could feel the weight of her guilt pressing against the air between us, but there was no apology that could undo what had been done. Not truly. Daddy, on the other hand, became colder. He avoided me completely, focusing only on the farm and the letters from Henry. If I looked at him too long, he would bark, "Go. Don't question what's been arranged." The first real blow came when the financial truth hit me. Henry's support, the payments that had been a secret for years, were now irregular. He tried to balance the arrangement with his own guilt and the demands of his business, but it meant our household, my household, was precarious. Food on the table became less certain. The farm needed repairs that couldn't be postponed. And every time I thought I could catch my breath, another bill, another demand reminded me that I had no real control. Raising my children in the midst of all this was nearly impossible. Our eldest, little Samuel, had just turned 4, and his bright, trusting eyes reminded me constantly of everything I had lost. I wanted to protect him from the weight of our circumstances, from the shame that whispered in the back of my mind. But there were moments when my boys, Samuel and his younger brother Thomas, would ask why Daddy seemed sad or why Grandma never smiled the way other mothers did. I couldn't lie to them entirely. I couldn't explain in full, but I whispered fragments. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. But we must be brave anyway. The societal judgment was unbearable. Neighbors began to notice the tension, the subtle cracks in our family's facade. Whispers followed us down the street. "Hazel looks so pale lately. What's happened to her?" I heard her parents had some trouble with debts. Even strangers' glances weighed on me, each one a silent question about my worth and my choices. I carried that burden along with the knowledge that my life, which I had once believed was mine to shape, had been manipulated from the start. Financial struggles forced me to learn things I never imagined. I had been trained in proper household duties, but survival required far more than that. I learned to budget every cent. I began mending clothes not just for appearances, but to stretch what little we had. I baked bread in larger batches to feed the children and barter with neighbors for vegetables or milk. I even sold small hand-stitched items at the local market, clutching every dollar as if it were a lifeline, and in a way it was. Emotionally, I was at my lowest. Some nights, after putting the boys to bed, I would sit by the window and stare at the dark woods beyond our yard, wondering if life would ever be kind again. I felt betrayed by those I should have trusted most: my parents, my husband, even the world itself. There were nights when the idea of running away, leaving everything behind, crossed my mind. But the weight of the children, of responsibility, of fear kept me rooted. Yet slowly the struggle began to forge a new strength within me. Each day I managed to keep food on the table, to care for my children, to balance the chaos of life. I realized I had more power than I had ever believed. I could survive. I could endure. I could learn to navigate a world that had been unfairly stacked against me. There were moments of anger, yes, when a letter from my parents arrived with its passive-aggressive reminders, when Henry hesitated or failed to understand my pain, when neighbors' eyes judged me. But those moments also lit a fire. I began to notice that while I had been a passive participant in my early life, I could now actively shape my days. Each chore, each small income earned, each decision to rise above fear became an act of reclaiming my own life. By the time summer rolled in, I realized something I hadn't acknowledged before. Survival was not enough. I wanted more. I wanted dignity, independence, and a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with obedience, arrangement, or financial obligation. And for the first time in years, I began to imagine a future I could own. But the road to empowerment would be slow, painful, and fraught with setbacks. The aftermath of betrayal is not a straight path. It winds, loops, and forces you to confront the worst parts of yourself. And in that season of struggle, I began to learn the lesson that would eventually carry me forward. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes, strength is simply the quiet act of refusing to give up, no matter how heavy the weight of the past becomes. By the time the following autumn arrived, the bitter taste of betrayal had dulled slightly, replaced by a simmering determination I had not known I possessed. The house was still small, still cramped, and the bills still piled high, but something inside me had shifted. I realized that survival alone was no longer enough. I wanted, not just for myself but for my children, to reclaim control over our lives. I began small. I started with skills I already possessed but had never thought to use for more than household duties. My sewing, once a chore I endured for appearances, became a source of income. I crafted linens, repaired neighbors' garments, and even designed small dresses for the local shop. Each stitch was a quiet rebellion, a reminder that I could create something beautiful from my hands even if the world had treated me like a transaction. Cooking, too, became a craft rather than a mere obligation. I experimented with recipes I had learned as a child, adding my own touches, new flavors, preservation methods, even small baked goods I sold to neighbors at the market. Slowly, I built a reputation for quality and care. People began asking for my work, paying in coins and bills that no longer belonged to anyone but me. Every coin felt like freedom. Every nod of appreciation felt like validation. Henry, to his credit, attempted to understand. He began to offer support, not the control he had exercised before, but guidance as a partner. He watched as I grew, as I carved out a small sphere of power within our modest life, and I think for the first time he truly saw me, not as a daughter of his arrangement, not as a purchased bride, but as a woman capable of standing on her own. It was slow, awkward, and tinged with tension, but it mattered. The transformation was not without setbacks. There were days when the weight of what my parents had done pressed down harder than ever. Letters still arrived occasionally, reminders of debts, obligations, and favors I was expected to honor. And some nights, when the children were asleep, I would sit by the window and feel the old fear creep back into my chest. But each time it threatened to paralyze me, I reminded myself of something essential. I was no longer a passive child in anyone's plans. I was the architect of my own days. I even began to teach my children small lessons in independence. Samuel, my eldest, learned how to help in the garden and manage simple chores. Thomas, my youngest, began helping with sewing scraps and simple tasks in the kitchen. It wasn't just about survival, it was about resilience. I wanted them to know that even when the world seems unfair, even when the people we trust make choices we cannot comprehend, we have the ability to shape our lives and build something lasting. By winter, my efforts began to show real results. I had a modest savings for emergencies, a small but steady income from my sewing, and a network of neighbors and friends who respected my work and, gradually, my story. The empowerment was quiet, but it was unmistakable. I no longer felt like a passenger in my life. I was steering my own course, slowly but surely. Perhaps the most powerful part of this transformation was the internal shift. I no longer saw myself solely as a victim of circumstance. I began to forgive not my parents for their betrayal, not Henry for his complicity, but myself for the years I had allowed fear to define me. That forgiveness was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it changed everything. I could breathe. I could plan. I could dream again. By the time spring arrived the following year, I had established a small routine that combined household management, work, and planning for our future. Henry remained in our lives, still distant at times, still carrying the weight of his own guilt, but he became a partner rather than a controller. I began thinking about what I could do next, how I could expand my skills, and how I could ensure that my children had a future entirely their own, a life free from the hidden agreements and secret transactions that had shaped my early years. Looking back, those months of struggle, despair, and betrayal became the foundation of my resilience. I realized that the human spirit has an extraordinary capacity to endure, to adapt, and to reclaim strength even in circumstances designed to break it. And for the first time since that fateful day when Henry arrived, I allowed myself to believe in the possibility of hope. With each passing season, I felt the weight of the past gradually shift from my shoulders. It never fully disappeared. Betrayal leaves marks that do not vanish, but I had learned to carry it with grace rather than letting it crush me. Winter gave way to spring and spring to summer, and the rhythm of daily life became my anchor. I expanded my sewing work, no longer content with mending alone. I began creating more elaborate pieces, dresses for the children of neighbors, small quilts for families in town, embroidered linens that could be sold at the market. Business grew slowly but steadily. I learned to keep accounts, track expenses, and even negotiate prices. I had never imagined I could be confident in such matters, but necessity breeds competence, and my determination knew no bounds. Henry, surprisingly, became more respectful as he observed my independence. He no longer attempted to control my daily routines. Instead, he offered help when needed, running errands, paying for supplies, or occasionally watching the boys so I could focus on my work. There were still moments of tension, of course. He could not erase the past, and neither could I. But the partnership began to feel authentic, grounded not in obligation but in mutual understanding. My children became my pride and my strength. Samuel and Thomas were growing into bright, capable little boys. Samuel showed a natural curiosity for numbers and patterns. Thomas was kind-hearted and thoughtful, always looking out for his older brother. I encouraged their interests, nurtured their gifts, and made it my mission to ensure they never felt trapped by circumstances outside their control. I wanted them to know, as I had learned, that resilience and determination could shape a life in the face of hardship. I also began connecting with other women in the community. Many were mothers like me, managing households on tight budgets, navigating social expectations, or recovering from personal challenges. We shared recipes, tips for managing finances, and small victories from our daily lives. In these conversations, I found solace and a sense of camaraderie. I realized that collective wisdom and shared support were powerful tools for survival and empowerment. One afternoon, a neighbor approached me with an idea. "Hazel," she said, "your sewing is beautiful. Have you ever thought about selling more than just small items? Perhaps a line of children's clothing or home linens?" The suggestion sparked something inside me. I had never dared to dream that big. Yet the thought of expanding my work, of creating something lasting and independent, was exhilarating. I began planning in secret, sketching designs late at night after the boys were asleep. Each night I whispered to myself, "This is for you, Hazel. For your freedom and theirs." Financial independence grew slowly, but with it came a sense of pride I had never felt. I was no longer bound solely by the fear and control that had defined my early years of marriage. I could make decisions. I could take risks. I could create a home that felt like a sanctuary rather than a prison. Evenings became moments of reflection. I would sit in the dim glow of the lamp, my sewing laid aside, and think about how far I had come. The fear that had once paralyzed me, the terror of that first visit, the letters, the betrayal, was still there, but it was quieter now. Its power had diminished. I had claimed space for myself, and in doing so, I had learned that even a life shaped by manipulation could be reshaped by courage, creativity, and perseverance. Perhaps the most profound realization came one afternoon as I watched Samuel teach Thomas to read from a small, worn book. Their laughter filled the room, pure and untarnished. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. For the first time in years, I sensed that I had built something lasting, not just income or stability, but a foundation of love, resilience, and hope that would endure long after the betrayal had faded into memory. It was not a life free from challenges. There were still hardships, moments of doubt, and the lingering sting of betrayal, but it was a life of my own making. And for Hazel, the girl who had once been trained, prepared, and sold, that was a victory beyond measure. Years passed, and with them came a quiet understanding of life, of mistakes, of forgiveness, and of the resilience that quietly shapes our hearts. Looking back now, I realize that the girl who once stood in a navy blue dress, trembling under the weight of a future arranged for her, is not the same woman who sits here today. That child was forced into obedience, molded by fear and burdened by the secrecy of her parents' decisions. But through struggle I found strength, through betrayal I found clarity, through survival I found purpose. I often think about my parents and the mixture of love and fear that guided their choices. Did they believe they were protecting me? Perhaps. But the way they carried out their plan, the letters, the hidden payments, it was not protection. It was control, a transaction that disregarded my autonomy. I cannot excuse it. And yet, I have forgiven them in my own quiet way, not because their actions were just, but because holding on to anger would have tethered me to the past, preventing me from building the life I now cherish. Henry, too, remains a complicated figure in my life. Our marriage began under the shadow of manipulation, but over the years, we have carved out a new kind of partnership. It is imperfect, but it is ours. We communicate with honesty now, and while the scars of the past never fully fade, they have become part of the story we share, teaching us both humility, patience, and understanding. The boy I once saw as a stranger with cold, assessing eyes has grown into a man capable of reflection, care, and quiet partnership. Raising Samuel and Thomas was, perhaps, my greatest achievement. I poured every lesson learned from hardship into their upbringing: resilience, empathy, independence, and the understanding that one's life is their own to shape. I watched them grow into men who think critically, who question injustice, who value integrity above convenience. They are living proof that even in the shadow of betrayal, love and guidance can cultivate strength. I also discovered something I had long forgotten in the turmoil of my youth: joy. Small, quiet joys that I had once believed were out of reach. The way sunlight falls across a freshly baked loaf of bread, the laughter of children playing in the yard, the satisfaction of a carefully stitched quilt, the pride in a neighbor's nod of approval. These moments remind me that life, no matter how painful, is also rich with beauty. And I have learned to savor them. Looking back on the years of preparation, fear, and deceit, I realize that the most important lessons were not about obedience or propriety, but about courage. Courage to see truth, to confront it, to endure its consequences, and ultimately to reclaim my life. I learned that strength is not always loud or heroic. Often, it is the quiet decision to keep going day after day when the world seems unfair. And now, at this stage of my life, I share my story not to dwell on betrayal or to seek sympathy, but to offer hope. For anyone listening, especially young women, daughters, mothers, or even those who, like me, felt powerless in their youth, I want you to know this: your past does not define you. The circumstances of your childhood, the decisions of those around you, the injustices you endure, they do not have the final word. You can reclaim your life. You can forge your path. You can find strength in unexpected places. I also share this as a reminder of gratitude. Gratitude for resilience, for lessons learned through hardship, for children who remind us of love and hope, and for the quiet victories that accumulate over time. Life is not perfect. It will never be perfect. But it is what we make of it that matters most. Each choice, each act of courage, each refusal to give in to despair builds the foundation for a future we can own. And finally, I share this story because I hope it encourages connection. To my viewers, to those who sit quietly watching these tales unfold, I encourage you to engage, like, comment, and share your own experiences. There is profound power in community, in realizing that you are not alone, and that the struggles we endure can become stories of resilience, lessons of hope, and beacons for others. And I am Hazel. I am a mother, a survivor, a woman who was once betrayed and trained, who found her own strength, and who continues to build a life that is truly mine. And I tell my story because I want you to remember, no matter the shadows that fall upon you, the light within can guide you forward, one brave step at a time. Now, as I sit here in the quiet of my home, the evening sun spilling golden light across the walls, I feel a sense of peace that was once unimaginable. The girl who trembled in the navy blue dress, trained to obey, confined by secrets and arrangements, would scarcely recognize the woman I've become. That girl was taught to be proper, to please others, to accept her fate without question. But I learned something far more important. Life is not about obedience, it is about choice, resilience, and the courage to create your own path. The years of struggle, of heartbreak, of betrayal were not easy. They left marks deep and lasting on my heart and on my soul. But those marks also taught me lessons I could not have learned any other way. I learned the importance of self-reliance, the necessity of hard work, and the quiet strength that grows when one refuses to surrender to fear. I learned that even in the shadow of manipulation and control, one can find agency, one can carve out dignity, and one can nurture hope. Watching Samuel and Thomas grow into strong, thoughtful men has been my greatest joy and affirmation. They carry the lessons of resilience, empathy, and independence I tried to instill in them. They have inherited not my fear but my courage, not my hesitation but my determination. In seeing them thrive, I am reminded that the choices I made, no matter how painful the path, were worth it. The future belongs to them and to anyone willing to fight for their own freedom and happiness. I have also learned the power of forgiveness, not the kind that erases wrongs or absolves those who caused pain, but the kind that frees the spirit. I have forgiven my parents in the quiet of my heart, not because their actions were excusable, but because clinging to resentment would have imprisoned me further. And I have learned to forgive myself for the years I allowed fear to dictate my life, for the moments I felt powerless, and for the tears I thought might never end. Forgiveness became the tool that allowed me to move forward, to reclaim my life, and to embrace the future with open hands. Life, I've discovered, is a mosaic of joys and sorrows, of challenges and triumphs. It is in the ordinary moments, the laughter of children, the warmth of a well-cooked meal, the satisfaction of work well done, that we find our strength. And it is in those moments that we can teach others, guide others, and inspire resilience in ways that echo far beyond our own experience. To anyone listening to my story, I want to leave you with this message. Never underestimate the strength within you. Even when circumstances seem unbearable, even when the choices of others try to dictate your fate, you have the power to reclaim your life. You have the capacity to endure, to learn, to grow, and to transform adversity into opportunity. The path may be long and uncertain, but every step you take towards self-determination is a victory. Remember also the importance of community. Share your story. Listen to the stories of others. Connect with those who understand struggle and offer guidance to those still finding their way. There is profound healing in realizing that none of us are truly alone, and that together we can navigate life's trials with greater wisdom, strength, and hope. As for me, Hazel, I now see my life not as a series of betrayals, but as a journey of transformation. I have discovered that courage, resilience, and love, both for oneself and for others, are the truest measures of success. I have learned that life can be rebuilt, even from its most painful moments, and that the choices we make in response to adversity define our character far more than the adversity itself. So, my dear viewers, I encourage you. Embrace your strength, pursue your passions, nurture your loved ones, and live fully in the face of fear. Stand tall even when the world tries to weigh you down. Remember that the past, no matter how difficult, does not dictate the entirety of your future. Your life, your choices, your courage, your love, is yours to shape. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it brings you comfort, courage, and the quiet reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope can grow and life can be reclaimed.